Hello and welcome, everyone. We're live. So you see some familiar faces here on the panel. It's our regular Zero Gravity crew, but we're joined today with a very special guest, Mr. Brent Earls from Mirazon. So we're going to get to some introductions here shortly, but first, a few housekeeping notes. So we are streaming on 3 different platforms on X, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We've got a very special giveaway that we're going to do on today's session. $100 from Amazon. So I'm going to be entering on the side. So you guys that are moderating, don't disqualify me because I can surely use that.
Oh,
So
no.
in order to enter, it's super simple. All you've got to do is add your name into any one of the chats. No emails, just drop in your name, and the moderators are going to insert those into a randomizer. And we're going to draw at the end of today's stream for that lucky winner that's going to have that $100 Amazon gift card added to their balance. So again, if I enter 3 or 4 times, just let me play. So with that, we've got a great show for you today. We're going to be talking about how Mirazon has got firsthand real world experience on creating a secure, simple, and powerful backup solution using Ootbi. So with that, I'm going to pitch it right to Anthony, let him get to some intros, and we'll get this show kicked off.
Thanks, Matt. Yep, Anthony Cusimano here, Director of Technical Marketing at Object First. So excited to be here today, and I'm excited to dig into our conversations around the secret to simple, secure backup. Before I do that, I'm gonna let Sterling say hello to the people. What's up, Sterling?
Hey, how's everybody going? How's everybody doing? Everything is going great over here. Sterling Wilson here again, product strategy and hype man with my buddies. Love being here with you guys. And Brent, what you got going on today, man?
Hey, Brent Earls, CTO at Mirazon. We're a managed service provider consulting company based in central US. So we've been with Veeam for about 16 years now. So long history.
Great to have you here.
That's awesome. 16 years. So Veeam's been around, what, 17 years now?
Yeah, they were on version 1 when they first came and pitched to us, and we were like, you got to have more than this, guys.
And you were really there at the beginning. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for joining us today, Brent. Like I said before, we're talking about the secret to simple, secure backup. And I love that we started at the very beginning with Veeam, because I'm sure back then, there wasn't much when it came to VMware backup. And we know that's why Veeam came to be. But let's talk a little bit about where things at are today. Firstly, I want to do a little bit of a dive into cloud. Just thinking about how in the last 10 years, it went from everyone was freaking out, got to spin up a cloud account. It's so easy. I can get all my resources there, super fast, super simple. And then, we started thinking about putting backups there and what that meant. Where are we at today? And I'm going to start with you, Brent. Like, I'm really curious from Mirazon's perspective, what is the vibe with cloud when it comes to simple and secure backup?
So the cloud's a tool. So like any tool, you have to put it in the right place and use it in the right way to actually get a benefit out of it. So, when we first started really seeking offsite backups that were immutable, the cloud was basically the only option you really had at the time. So everyone started kind of flocking there, throwing up a AWS account and checking that immutability box, and cool, now I have an offsite that's also immutable. Everything's great. And then those people tried to use it. And they had multiple different issues across the board. Getting your backups up there takes a long time, but that's only a one-time thing, right? Don't have to worry about that. Then they have to reseed a backup. And crap. Okay, I got to wait for the weekend so I don't, DOS my entire environment while I'm trying to get this up there. Then they actually try to restore at some point, and that's when the pain really comes, because you're not restoring usually in a lazy, just doing this for fun. It's usually the world's on fire. So you're really trying to get it quickly, and pulling all that data back down is where pain really started. And then of course, all of a sudden your cloud bill's more expensive this month. It's like, wait, what happened? So it kind of lost some of its immediate, I guess, fervor, because when people actually tried to use it and started using it, it still definitely has a place. But as your primary protection for your backups, it definitely has some issues when you're talking about immediacy.
I feel kind of like the whole cloud thing, and let me know your opinion. It was sort of like a delayed pain as well, right? Because we we embarked on these journeys. We pushed all this data up. We all had plans. I was on the customer side and we all had plans to push it up. Different technologies. We ended up using the cloud a little bit differently than we had first thought. I think in the very, very early days of cloud, we thought we were going to push everything to the cloud. No more data centers, no more anything. We're just going to run our entire lives from this cloud. But then we did this and we put our journey up there in different ways. And then to your point, we have these things that go wrong. We have to recover. We have to bring these things back. We start to see these ingress egress bills from this cloud. Do you feel this is sort of an awakening at this point where people are taking a step back and going, oof, this actually isn't exactly as I thought it would be?
Yeah, I mean, IT is very cyclical. Everything's about centralized, decentralized, centralized, decentralized.
Yeah.
And so everybody got on the centralize again methodology, and specifically around the hyperscaler cloud providers. But then they started actually trying to do it, and they realized there's a lot of asterisks and caveats. Like, okay, yeah, we want to move our ERP. Oh, but our ERP is running on 2008. That's not actually supported in Azure. We need to upgrade ERP before we can move it. Well, that's a year-long process. So while they're trying to work on this cloud first initiative and get stuff up there, other stuff is moving, but then they're already starting to experience some of the cost pains of it all. And backups was one of the easiest things to get up there because it was immediate and there was a tangible benefit to it. But then there were the other side of it, because even if you put it straight into the cloud, so it's like, okay, I used an S3 bucket. That means that when I go to restore into AWS, if we have a true disaster, tornado comes through, building gone, I can bring it up in AWS, no problem, immediate. Well, now you've still got to build a Veeam server up there. You've still got to get all your accounts set up for it. You've got to get your networking set up. Restoring it into AWS isn't just a super simple, I click a button because it's already up there. You've got to do a lot of work to actually make that happen.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, how do you get it back out? Like, if that wasn't your actual long-term intention to keep it up there, it's a lot harder to get out of the cloud than it is to get into it. So we've kind of gone through some of these iterations, and some of it you could start seeing early as this might be a problem, and it wasn't until people actually experienced some of those pain points that they were like, oh, hey, yeah, maybe we need to look at this again. But for the longest time, if you wanted immutability, there weren't really options. You were either buying an enterprise grade, basically a worm device, or you put it in the cloud. And that was kind of the only two options you really had to get immutability.
Yeah. So in my past, they would call it over-rotated, to your point, Brandon. Like you either over-rotate to the cloud or you over-rotate back on-prem. There's a healthy balance. And, one of the ways that I would always describe the cloud is a digital tape replacement for those people looking to, offload their tapes and get into more modern storage. You just send it up there. It's immutable and it's pretty much forgotten until what if scenarios happen and you have to go get those digital tapes and do a recovery. The issue that I personally have seen over the past 3 or so years is, you used to have failures and problems that were confined or isolated to a handful of workloads. Maybe a LUN died on the storage. Maybe you did get somehow infiltrated, but it was quarantined to a certain segment of the business. And, that's where things like Veeam's instant recovery and having on-prem backups were, really powerful. The issue now, though, is with ransomware, 9 times out of 10, it's not an isolated event. It's anything that it can get its hands on, and your on-prem infrastructure is now at risk. And things like instant recovery and having to pull data from the cloud and stream it is not exactly fast. Not only that, but you have egress fees that you then have to consider when you're looking at pricing. It's like if you had to do a onesie twosie recovery, okay, fine, that might be, survivable from a budget perspective. But if you've got to go pull everything out, not only is there a time that you're down, reputation takes a hit, brand integrity, things like that. But, to your point, Brent, it's not as simple as flipping the on switch in the cloud if that's not where you want it to be permanently. It's one thing if you're doing a migration to the cloud, but if the point is you only want this temporarily there, but you ultimately want to bring it back on-prem, that complicates matters exponentially, at least in my experience.
Yeah, and that is a very good point. Up until now, most of the restores were, I've installed Windows updates and now it doesn't boot anymore,
Yep.
or I ran this command in PowerShell and it jacked everything up. I need to undo that. And so it really was people restoring like individual servers or just the OS drive of a server. And Veeam made all that super simple. It
Yep.
still does. But now with ransomware, it's very common that people are getting every single server. A lot of times, the Veeam server itself, they're getting to everything in the environment. We've seen DR sites, backup servers, everything be compromised. And literally, the only thing people had was their one immutable copy of their backups, which, okay, it was in Wasabi. That was a very nice, cheap insurance policy. But now you're going to be downloading that at 30 megs a second for the next week.
I think that's a really solid point there, and something that Matt said as well. It was perfectly fine. I think this is your quote. When you're putting your backups there, it's easy to put the backups. Somehow we evolved into a world where people thought the cloud literally was just as fast as bringing it back from your data center or your on-premises place. And so I think that's where some of the miscommunication happened, right? Where they said, "Oh, it's perfectly fine. We're not just going to send cold archive backups up there, the replacement for that digital tape. We're actually going to just send daily backups up there because we can recover," to your point, Brent, very quickly. One button and the whole infrastructure is running, and that's not exactly the case.
Yeah, I mean, there's ways of making that work if you're doing like Azure AWS Site Recovery Manager, but then you're paying
Yeah.
for the storage, for whatever compute's necessary to do it, for the license to do it all the time for your insurance policy at that point. So, now instead of it just being I've got backups up there that's costing me a couple $100 a month, if you're actually building a true disaster recovery site ahead of time and have it to where you can get that one click, you're at thousands and thousands of dollars a month to actually have that flexibility up in the cloud. So there's been so many different ways people have found that the pricing structure was made very favorable to the hyperscalers. There's so many little nitpicky things that they can charge you for to make sure they always get theirs.
Yeah, and the one other thing I would bring up while we're on this topic of cloud, it was something that you said it's been at least a year plus ago, Brent. When we chatted, the other big consideration here is everybody just for some reason assumes that everybody's rocking fiber to the internet with unlimited bandwidth and throughput, but the reality is that's not the reality. Many of these businesses don't have the luxury of having the pipe or the bandwidth required to even a achieve getting the backups offsite to the cloud, and b, if they ever had to do that recovery, like what we were just chatting about, I mean, they would be lucky to do the onesie twosie recovery, right? Much less an entire business restoration. And it's just based on geography, where they live, what ISP options are available in their region. So that's the other big consideration that, some people have forgotten that, bandwidth is not just a given. That's something that is going to be, depending on where you are in the world.
Solid
Yeah,
point.
especially around here in the Midwest, the Kentucky, Tennessee, Indiana. There's a lot of manufacturing here. Well, they don't build manufacturing in the major metro areas. They want to get the cheapest employees they can get. So they're sticking these things in the middle of nowhere. And we have a lot of manufacturing customers. You basically fly to a major city, drive 2 hours to get to these plants. They're getting maybe 50 meg, 100 meg internet a lot of times still, might be a cable modem even. Even throwing big company money around, they're still often getting stuck with some low bandwidth that's really impacting their capabilities.
And Brent, if I could, I would love to transition to our next topic. And this is a prime case to do it because it's always DNS, right? DNS is always the culprit anytime you try to test all this stuff ahead of time. So when you look at cloud considerations, everything we were just chatting about, having everything just on-prem, certainly you don't have the challenge of testing failovers or anything like that. But what are some other network considerations that you guys have personally ran into at Mirazon, with regards to just networking problems or complications for that matter?
Yeah, so on true networking, of course, DNS and IP is always a thing. When you're moving up to the cloud, you can technically use some VXLAN different technologies to extend your IP scheme, but you don't usually want to. You want to re-IP if something's in the cloud. That makes DR an absolute nightmare, because you're re-IPing, you're hoping everything updates DNS. It never updates DNS.
No.
Even if it does, you've got websites that are statically bound to a specific IP. Being able to do your testing in on-prem situations makes it so much easier. We do DR tests for people a lot of times, and it's like a 2-hour thing. We just kind of bring some stuff up, make sure that we can get it in an environment that works. Everything's good because networking's easy to control at that point. And we kind of move forward. In the cloud, that becomes a much more complicated thing. Not to mention, you don't own the network per se. You're fitting within the confines of how AWS allows you to own that network, which, you get people who are really familiar. It's like, oh, I just dropped this BGP, and oh, how do I actually distribute that up there? It definitely adds some complications. But a lot of the network, air quotes, considerations are actually around the servers themselves. So there's a lot of different ways to set up your backup infrastructure. There's a lot of different ways to places to put your backups now. Veeam talks about their immutable repo all the time at Veeam On, and it is a cool technology. They have got that down to a pretty tight science. And when you do it in a lab where you don't have to worry about hardware, it's just a VM, it is so easy to set up. But then when you actually put it in the real world, and you're putting it on a bare metal server, and maybe you're a Windows guy, a lot of people are, and you're trying to figure out how to get the drivers working right in Linux. And, Ubuntu's a lot easier than it was, but there's still always that one thing that won't work. That one nick, that one thing that you then sit there in the forums for hours, like, somebody has to have had this problem. What is the fix? And so you're working around those types of things. Then a lot of decent sized customers are also actually using a SAN to store their backups. So getting a SAN hooked up to that Linux device to get hardened repos set up on it. Now, if it's iSCSI, you've got to play with getting iSCSI going and PIO going. All that stuff isn't just as turnkey as you would expect. You have to know commands and actually do it CLI for a lot of it. Edit config files, all of that. So a lot of time, that's super simple. We did it in the lab. It's cool. 5 minutes, I got hardened repo up. In reality, that becomes a multi-day, multi-week project of trying to troubleshoot little problems, get everything set up, get everything configured. But then how do you maintain it long term? So I'm not a Linux person by nature. I know we can run some updates on it, but I don't know all the things to worry about. You're seeing all the different security reports coming out for everything. The ones that make the big flashy headlines are Windows. They happen to Linux too. How many times have we seen SSH vulnerabilities come out? Right? So you've got to turn off SSH to be secure. Cool. Okay, I've turned off SSH. How do I manage this thing? How do I actually get to it to turn the updates on? Well, I'll just go through the iDRAC or the ILO. No problem. I can go through that. Oh, well, that's actually also got security vulnerabilities. So maybe I shouldn't have that connected. Maybe I should take that offline. Okay, maybe I can keep the patches on it. Well, you can't do MFA on most of those. So now I've got a 20-character password, which is the limit on most of them, and I can't have MFA. So now my break glass server that has all my backups immutable is actually on the network in a way where I can't put MFA on it, and I'm having to try to hopefully patch everything. And it really becomes a lot more work long-term to maintain it than it seems like it should be.
Yeah, that was a great step through. Wow.
Yeah, no kidding. The whole theme of this webinar is simplicity, and that sounded like one of the most complicated things I never want to deal with in my life. So thank you. I do want to kind of ask the question though, because we obviously work at Object First. We've created Ootbi. We really pride ourselves in the simplicity and how easy it is to configure and network our solution inside of the existing environments. And I'll also I'll ask Matt to throw up a QR code in case anyone's interested. You want to see the whole process. You can scan that and watch our box to backup in 15 minutes. Super easy way to understand what I'm about to ask Brent. But In your experience and having used Ootbi personally, do you feel that it helps bring the kind of network simplicity that your customers need and alleviate some of the pain points we talked about in that previous conversation?
Yeah. So, I mean, it really is. The most difficult part of setting one of these up is getting the rails in place, which is often
Noted.
the case. Getting the rails in the rack is the most difficult part, because literally bring it up, put IPs on it, click one thing, and it runs all its updates for firmwares, for OS, for everything across the board, and you're up and going. So it really does take all of that complexity out. Um, it's not free like that random box you have sitting on a shelf back there, but is the vendor even still supporting that random box
Right.
you have sitting on the shelf back there? It used to be all we worried about with support was, oh, I can get hardware. I got a third party. They'll ship me hard drives if they fail. No big deal. But now security is the number one thing you're actually wanting from support.
Yeah.
And if Dell doesn't support that box anymore because it's hit 7 years or whatever, and you want to just, well, this is a free option. Well, now you're not getting the security updates.
Yeah.
Are you on an old version of an OS on it? Well, you're not getting security updates. So the security's really become the biggest thing, and that's something third parties can't really deliver. So having a box that is from the ground up, built to be secure, built to be simple to update, purpose built is what it really comes down to. It's made to do one thing really well. And as we all know, as IT people, you can be an IT generalist or you can be a specialist. If you're a
Right.
specialist, you can just knock stuff out that takes generalists a lot of effort. That's kind of how Ootbi is. It's specialized for something, and it does that thing really well. It does it quickly, efficiently, and just kind of makes it work.
So Brent, one of the things that I wanted to jump in here and see if maybe you can talk to some of this from your experience. I'm going to throw up a question we got in the chat, and I feel like this one is a little bit of an overlap between the two topics. We've either started with or we're still discussing. The cloud considerations, network considerations, probably a deep dive conversation we could have offline, certainly. But just at a high level, what are you seeing here with regards to this question? And before you answer, I just want to remind everybody that maybe joined after the very beginning of the stream, we're going to be giving away $100 Amazon gift card on this stream. All you've got to do to enter is drop your name in any of the chats, whether you're watching on X, LinkedIn, or YouTube. So make sure you do that, because time is drawing near for us to randomize your name. So with that, Brent, thoughts on this question?
Yeah, so optimizing data transfer and how you're actually moving data is one of the biggest things we actually do for Veeam deployments. If we're coming in to someone that already exists, the proxies are super important for getting all this stuff cleaned up and working properly. So you definitely want to make sure that as you're backing up on-prem, that you're getting all your proxies set up right. That can literally 10x your speed, just getting proxies in the right place, in the right networks. But when you go to the cloud, it kind of depends on how you're going to the cloud. If you're just going to an S3 bucket, there's not a lot you can really do. You can put a gateway server in Veeam to a server that maybe has a higher QoS for getting to the internet or something like that. You can do something like that to try to optimize it. But when you're copying these backups, you're copying backups. They're already pre-compressed, pre-deduped, depending on how you've done them. They're already out there in that state. So as you're shipping them up, there isn't a whole lot you can really do to optimize it, aside from optimizing just to make sure the network itself has the fastest flow. And having a gateway server if you need to get past some bandwidth limitations, things like that. But there's not a lot you can really do going to the cloud, because you can't control the other side. You could always build your own Veeam server up there and put a proxy up there and try to get all the compression deduped that way. But now you're paying for a server to run all the time, and you're paying for that overhead.
Well, thanks for answering that question, Brent. And I know I learned something from that. So hopefully our question asker got their answer as well. We've talked a little bit about security throughout this, and it's definitely the underline to every conversation that ends up being had around cloud, network, infrastructure as a whole. Like, security has become basically, it used to be the syrup on the pancakes, but now it's the pancake, I feel like.
Yeah.
It's
true.
so important to consider in all facets of infrastructure technology now. When it comes to securing backups specifically, what has changed in the last 5 years, in your opinion?
Everything.
Where
You
do
can't
we
say everything.
So security, literally, we do a lot with mid-market customers. It used to be we're too small for security to be a big concern.
Yeah.
That's the problem for the JP Morgans. They're the target. If somebody's going to go for somebody, they're going to go for these big companies.
Sure.
And self-propagating ransomware wasn't really a concept that was very widely distributed, I guess, 5 years ago. But now, being able to put ransomware out there and actually get paid for it, it basically gets to a situation where, I can maybe get into a big company and ransom them for 4 million, but I can almost certainly get into 20 little companies and ransom them for 20,000. And it's so many of these smaller companies that never worried about security before. Now security, like they're getting hit more often than the big ones because it's easier. The 2-person IT shop, they're going to miss something somewhere. So it's not a matter of if but when you get hit anymore. It's constant, it's pervasive. No size of environment is safe anymore, because even if I can work a day and get $10,000 of ransomware, that sounds like a good payday.
It's a payday.
Yeah. So the big thing is backups were always, break glass in case of emergency. We hope we never have to use them, but if we do, we want them to be there.
Mm-hmm.
But ransomware can hit backups just as easily as anything else.
Yep.
So most of the attackers worth anything are finding the backups, making sure they can get to the backups before they ever do anything in the environment. And they might be in there for a month just sniffing around very unobtrusively before they get ready to go. So in that point, maybe sometime they happen to be able to sniff a credential getting into the backup server. They're in there. They obviously don't make their presence known. And then when they go, it's usually pre-scripted. So like 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, all of a sudden, everything's encrypted at once. By the time there's a problem, it's all gone. So we had our backup server. It was great. It's been working like a champ, but it wasn't immutable. And so it was encrypted just like everything else was. And our backups are gone. We had a DR site. Cool. It's over there. Well, guess what? It had a network tunnel to our main site. And so they got to that too. And they encrypted everything there as well. They're very intelligent people doing this. Like, they are people you would want to have on your staff. They know what they're doing. And they're making sure they're getting everything before they make their presence known. So they're getting all the backups and everything else. So then you get in, you're ready to break the glass in case of emergency, and you log in and backups are all encrypted. Servers often too brick to even open. So then it's like, well, what do I do? Okay, my backups are gone, my DR site's gone, my production's all gone. Like, people are literally in situations sometimes where they have nothing at all. And so the mutability at that point is your insurance policy. It's a low price to pay when you look at how much it costs per hour to be down. Having backups available. Well, if that immutability is up in the cloud, it's cheaper insurance policy in some situations, but now you've got to wait. Your business is down for hours while you bring that data down or restore it into the cloud. Whereas if you have a nice on-prem solution where you have a copy of your backups on-prem that is immutable and available, you can start instant ons immediately. Veeam 12 and up, instant on straight from object storage, no problem. Instant on over 100 meg internet pipe, that's going to be a problem still. But if you have fast storage on-prem, you can start bringing servers back within minutes.
Yeah.
Granted, be careful about how you bring them back so they don't immediately get encrypted again. But you can start getting stuff back online in minutes and start getting your business back up. And when you talk to a lot of like general managers of places, they have that dollar number for what it costs them per hour to be down. They know it. It's not something where they're like, oh, let me think about that for a while. No, they already know. They've had work stoppages. They know how expensive they are. A lot of times it's only a couple hours to pay for an Ootbi type appliance where you've got everything there, and your
Yeah.
glass is something you can go hug. You know, doesn't time out where, oh, there was an issue with the Azure portal today, so I can't get to my stuff, and I really need it. It's you can go hug your backups.
Yeah.
Yep.
Object
Yeah.
First always recommends hugging an Ootbi if you see one. It's a general disclaimer.
That's the truth.
Well, I love where this conversation has gone, and I know that we're already at the half-hour mark. But I'm just curious,
Wow.
Sterling, Matt, what are you guys seeing when it comes to security, specifically around the backups today?
Yeah, I was
Sterling,
going to say, one of the things that Brent said that really resonated with me that we're hearing more and more and more about is he said insurance. So immutability is definitely insurance, but it's even more than that. It literally is a direct lineage to actual insurance carriers, with regards, to policies now requiring immutability to be something that the business has, either A, just to get insured, or B, if they want any real discounts on their premium, that's a checkbox that they're going to have. And, I think it's been discussed on this webinar, but we've also been talking about this forever, is not everybody can wear the security expert hat and do all the other things, right? Sure, there are security experts, but when you look at the typical, backup administrator, you've got storage administration you have to deal with. You've got to have some networking fundamentals. You've got to have some sort of security basic knowledge. But we take all that onus, as a company and make it so simple. You don't have to know all those command line, actions that Brent was talking about earlier. You don't have to be that Linux expert to go make sure that all the permissions are set accurately and you didn't not dot an I or cross a T because you hadn't done it before, and you're literally on a Reddit forum just following along, doing it to the best of your ability. Yeah. So to me, that right there is one of the biggest things when you think about just security in general, is the expertise as well as the insurance part, that Brent talked about.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. For me, it's just the idea, and Brent really touched on this, that security touches everything. Like to Matt's point, we're wearing a lot of hats out there, and we're struggling with these new threats. These guys and ladies, they're very smart. They're coming after us. And so the idea is that we need to be ahead of it. And that we need to understand that security touches everything. And that's why we need to have solutions that really don't require us to dive completely into security. We can still do what we need to do, but have that power, have the flexibility behind us, knowing that to Brent's point, we can go hug our Ootbi.
Yeah, and everything with security is all about defense in depth. You always want multiple layers to that onion. You don't go, well, we've got CrowdStrike on our desktop, so we aren't going to run a real firewall. No, you still run a real firewall. We're doing this, we're not going to do MFA. No, you still do MFA. You always are worried about layering things to get you those extra levels of protection. And I mean, you guys can cover your ears, but usually when we're doing an Ootbi deployment, we still have another form of backup somewhere on something else. It might be a cloud copy that is our extra one, but you never want to make it to where any one device, company, product, anything is your only line of defense against an issue.
Well said.
So, it might be layering that with a normal server with backups in it, a cloud option. There's a lot of things, but you're basically trying to make sure there's as many different layers between that the malicious party, we'll say, has to figure out, because the more things they have to figure out, the less likely they are to figure them all out and find everything.
Solutions. It takes solutions, doesn't it? And I mean, then that's why customers are turning to partners like Mirazon to make sure that they have all those things covered. People aren't going to leave the cloud, right? They're going to continue to leverage the cloud. This is a new threat and a new way to deal with a new threat, right?
Yeah. And, like I said, we've worked with Veeam for years, and, it just works, but you can set it up in 30 minutes and have backups going. It takes longer than 30 minutes to have it set up fully properly with security on it, with these extra reliability layers. So I appreciate from a lot of their standpoint that it's very flexible, but it is software running on something else. So that software has to be configured right, and there is a full solution stack, just like with the hardened repo. there's hardware under there. There's an operating system under there. Their software part of it's really great and super easy to use, but you've still got to know how to build that whole solution with it. And I mean, that's true with literally any product anywhere. You've got to know how to actually implement it properly to have it go. So.
Yeah. I really like your explanation with you just keep adding layers to it. Recently Veeam and Numberline published a paper called Zero Trust Data Resilience, because they'd found that with zero trust principles, it never really touched or considered the backup part of the equation. And one of the key tendencies in ZTDR is segmentation and understanding the importance of having multiple resilience zones to recover from. And you said cover our ears, but anytime myself, Matt, Sterling, we're at one of these shows, people ask us, they're like, hey, Ootbi's ransomware proof, so I don't need to buy another backup. And all three of us resoundingly will say, no, you need to have 3-2-1. Ootbi's not meteor proof. Like, it's not Godzilla proof, right? Like, there are things that can happen to physical devices or network outages, whatever, things we talked about on this call, that still require you to have multiple resiliency zones in those multiple locations. It's just best practices. So it's important to remember that, there is no one answer for anything. But I think that's why we encourage folks to join webinars like these, meet folks like Brent, and partner up with those who have the security expertise. They have the domain and infrastructure expertise to go off and build these kind of setups to ensure that resiliency is met no matter what goes wrong in the environment. I do want to do one more QR code shout out, Matt. So I'm gonna set you up here. Our very own Casey King recently wrote a blog on how we sell simplicity. And I highly recommend people go check it out, give it a read. Oh, and I have to click it because it didn't sync up. There we go. So we have Casey King's blog on the screen here. Scan that QR code and give it a read. Casey's the person who facilitates these webinars. And just give her a little bit of a shout out here. Put together this great read on understanding how, if you are a partner or you're looking to kind of increase the way that you sell security posture and improve your backup security, this is a great way to go off and spend some time with that material and learn a little bit more about that. And as we continue this conversation, just any more thoughts around sort of security, the network considerations, the cloud considerations when it comes to building that better backup posture? I'll start with you, Sterling.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really reach out to your partners like Mirazon. Make sure you understand where your posture of your data is today, and really consider what you need in the way of security. I know we here believe that security, adding security to your backups, making sure you have ransomware-proof object storage. It shouldn't be difficult. So reach out and we'll help you there.
Yeah, I think from my standpoint, I wanted to call out a quote. Matter of fact, it's from Casper in the chat, and he's talking about the 3-2-1-1-0 rule. This is very near and dear to my heart. And Brent, you literally touched on this earlier. It's like, there's so many faucets of data protection and staying resilient, in the face of ransomware, but really any other cyber threat or potential failure. You can't put all your eggs in one basket, just like, Sterling and Anthony have said. You got to get them off site. You got to diversify, right? In general, segment everything. But when it comes time to actually do the recovery, there needs to be testing that's already done preemptively, before the backups are, marked successful. That's where Sure Backup comes in. But there's also got to be a way to test what you're about to restore isn't also compromised. And, Veeam has solutions to power all those types of intermediary tests, if you will. So one stop before you go back into production. In order to do something like that, though, you have to have performance on-prem to really run instant recoveries at scale so that you can test interoperability, domain access, and authentication and all these types of things. So having that data on-prem, immutable, that can provide the power that you're going to need when it comes time to do that restoration, that staged restoration, I think is absolutely critical. So you can't just look to the cloud as being the end all be all. And it goes back to exactly what you said at the very beginning, Brent. The cloud is a tool, but you've got to use it responsibly and in the manner that it was really intended to be, initially. And if you're using it as an offsite backup target, not as a hosted infrastructure, you need something else on-prem. It doesn't need to be your primary target. It needs to be secondary or tertiary, for that longer term storage. So that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, and that can't be overstated enough to test things. If you didn't notice, VMware reintroduced a new bug with CBT with 8.0 update 2, where it can corrupt backups because VMware gives Veeam the wrong data to back up. It's a known thing. It's out there. VMware's published about it. They fixed it eventually with an update, but it's one of the old situations that Sure Backup was made to specifically address. Is
Absolutely.
if you back up all the time, if there is some type of corruption somewhere in there, if you never test it, when you really care and you really need it,
Yeah.
it's not there. And so you've got to have that horsepower. You've got to make the jobs to do it. But to actually test those backups and run them and make sure stuff's working. And if you don't, then you can get a really rude surprise, even if you have kept all your backups safe.
Yeah, that's firstly, thank you for sharing that, because I hadn't heard that, but it's always something every week. We find that there's something new broken or something new that's trying to get access to our data. So thank you again, Brent, for joining us today. Your input has been invaluable. Like truly, there's so much to take away, so much to learn. If you only joined halfway through the stream, I encourage anyone to go back and watch the recap. There are nuggets throughout this entire program, but I'm sure many people want to know what was the result of our giveaway. So I'll pass it back to Matt. Let us know what's happening.
Yeah, sounds good. Just one final little joke there on that. It's not really a laughing matter, but Brent, when we talk about the 32110, it could be the 130, 30, 12. But if you didn't have the 0, what good are they?
Yep.
You have no idea if any of them are recoverable. So you can spend all that time and it be for nothing. So to your point, it's always imperative to do testing.
Yep.
Okay, with that said, the winner is, that's coincidental. It's Matt
Drum roll,
Price.
please. Oh, no,
what?
no.
That's not fair.
No, so
Can't
our
do
winner, our actual winner is Luis Serrano.
Wow. All right, Luis.
So he's watching on LinkedIn. So expect a direct message from one of the moderators on LinkedIn to sync you up with the email so we can get that $100 Amazon gift card over to you. We really appreciate everyone's engagement today. Like, everybody had some great questions. We got a lot of QR code scans. We really do appreciate that. Just like Anthony said, Brent, thanks so much for joining. It's such a pleasure. Every time you come on here, it's always insightful. There's always new stories to kind of sift through together to figure out ways that we can make intelligent recommendations for our joint customers on, how to have secure, simple, and powerful backup storage, right? So any final thoughts before we wrap things up, guys?
No, it's backups went from just being that ancillary job on someone's plate to really needing to be a priority. It's not something you can just, I'll get to that next week. It really is something that has to be addressed as a priority issue nowadays.
Yes.
Agreed. Have a plan before you need it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And if you don't have a plan, reach out to Mirazon. They'll help you come up with one.
Absolutely. I was just going to say, we've got to make sure we put, Brent and Mirazon up here on the QR codes. Somehow we were so involved in the conversation, we didn't throw that one up to the end. But make sure that, if you'd like more information and you want to sync up with our friends at Mirazon, scan this one. It'll be in the chat too. So if you're watching this in the replay, it should be a link that you'll have access to. With that, guys, I just want to thank everyone for the time. It was a great session today, great stream, and we hope to have you back sometime soon, Brent. And until then, thanks everyone for coming. If you've got any questions or you'd like more info, reach out to us. info@objectfirst.com is a great email for us. We've got the QR code up here for Brent over at Mirazon. We'll see you guys on the next stream. Y'all enjoy the rest of the week.
Thanks, everyone.